This is Everything Rugby League, a podcast for fans of the sport everywhere.
Can you believe it?
Each week, Keith and Lewis cover news and insights from the game's grassroots to the NRL and around the world.
Evening, everyone, and loyal listeners. Welcome to another edition of Everything Rugby League, the podcast, in what's been an absolutely cracking week of footy in both the Super League and the NRL, which we'll get to shortly. But firstly, I want to let everyone know that if you haven't already listened to the interview that we did with Stuart McLennan from the Greek Rugby League, I found it a fascinating interview to conduct, just the minefield that is to navigate through the politics that is rugby league in an underfunded country. So go back and have a listen to that episode, which came out last Wednesday and was our first ever interview episode. But tonight's episode, given it's a Monday night, is, of course, our usual weekly rundown with my trusty co-host, Lewis. Lou, how are you keeping, mate? All is well?
I'm all right, bro. Had a great weekend. Caught up with some friends on yesterday, and then this morning, because it's 8 a.m. Local time, my daughter started to wake us up at 4 a.m. So that's why I was late for a few minutes. So official apologies to you, bro. But how have you been?
Yeah, been good. I think there's a certain piece that comes with apathy around knowing how shit your team is, and you know when you're so annoyed at your team that you're just like, yeah, I didn't want them to win anyway. They didn't deserve to win. Winning would just be hiding how shit they really are, because you watch them every week for literally decades, and you know something's off. But you want it to be so highlighted that it's almost like rock bottom, because that's the only way that it'll be properly addressed. I have that with the Warriors right now. So apart from that, good weekend. Good weekend. All right, let's get to our first section, which is the weekend rundown. So I'll be doing the NRL this week, and we will start with Canberra going down pretty abysmally, really. Sorry, Lou, to Manly Seagulls, which is quite strange. It was like 12-all coming into half time, and then Manly scored, and then it was just a torrent of tries to Manly. So Manly ended up winning that game 46-24. Next, we have the Dolphins winning in Golden Point. Well done, Sean O'Sullivan there with a 2-point field goal, 34-32. Gold Coast with a donut against Cronulla, getting absolutely pummeled 44-0 at home. So a real statement game there from the Sharks. Newcastle 34 over West Tigers 18. It was a gallant effort from the West Tigers, but ultimately it's just not happening for the West Tigers. Great crowd up in the Hunter, 22,183. North Queensland ruining my tips by going down to the Broncos at home. They lost 42-18. That was a sellout crowd of just shy of 25,000. Parramatta somehow losing this game. They should call them Parramatta Warriors. 34-36 at home to Penrith. South Sydney losing to Melbourne in what was a pretty sort of predictable game there, 28-16, and the Dragons losing one of the most anticipated games of the year at Cogra, sellout crowd, going down 28-10 to the Canterbury Bulldogs, of course. Lou, what was your game of the round, and you got any sort of talking points from the round that was?
Yeah. So I mean, let's just touch on the Raiders very briefly. It was a very disappointing. A few weeks ago, I came on here and called us a team of destiny. That I think is basically done. The talking point from that game was, I'm so confused with this rule, because basically, don't know if you saw it, just before halftime, Hudson Young made a break and passed it to, I think, Adam Cook. It was a pretty shocking pass, but basically it dropped into Adam Cook's leg. Referee blew the whistle, but when they went to the video ref, it actually probably should have been given a try. But because he blew the whistle, it went all the way back to the 30-meter line of the Raiders, because that's where the play started. And I'm not saying that was the turning point, because the Raiders played poorly, but you see that, and then you see the lifting tackle on Jamal Fogarty, where for some reason the bunker now decides that it's okay to do lifting tackles provided they land safely. Just it just wasn't the Raiders' day, and to be honest, the Eagles played fantastic. Went up and they got sent off. Game of the round, or there was a I don't know. I guess it's hard because game of the round suggests that it was a tight, like the Bulldogs Raiders game last week. That was a fantastic game, back and forth. Like as opposed to this week, it was more like the Parramatta Eels Penrith game. It's comeback game rather than necessarily two teams just back and forth. So I'm gonna unfortunately have to go with the Dolphins Warriors game. Now we just touched on this very quickly. You guys need a new kicker. I know Chanel. I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
It's happened a few times now, and he was a good player. He's a really good player. Just not a goal kicker of note. And yeah, ridiculous that it's happened a few times now. And goal kicking is actually quite an important factor in the NRL. So surprised you guys haven't found one.
Yeah, huge. Like what did we lose the game to Canberra because of the goal kicking? We couldn't ice the extra. I think the Bulldogs game went to extra time. The Warriors have had so many games this year where if they just iced them maybe if SJ was fit for both the goal kicking and the game management at the end, then we'd be in a hell of a lot better place than what we are. But in reality, SJ won't be there next year, so someone's going to have to step up, and it's too soon for Jet Cleary to come through. I think he's only 19 years old. He signed a 3-year contract with us. So that leaves it to Luke Metcalf, Tomato Martin, or Chanel Harris-Tavita. And yeah, it's not looking good. Something's got to change it in that regard. But let's move on to the Super League before we hit up a couple of topics that caught our eye over the weekend. Do you want to take us through the Super League results on the weekend?
Yeah. So the Saints over the Salford Red Devils, 17-16. There was a couple 1-point wins, and the Dragons 23 over the Giants 23-22. Now, Arthur Moore with a 76-minute field goal, and we just talked about before. Arthur Moore also 1 out of 5 on his conversion. So yeah, you've got to get some better goal kickers. Hull KR 36 over the Cuthbert Tigers 6. Now the game that I watched was Leeds Rhinos 30 over the Wigan Warriors 4. Matty Smith. See this, and then sorry, I want to just briefly touch on this as well. Matty Smith got sent off for an elbow, which is debatable, but it was an elbow. Now, if that was in the NRL, I don't even think that would warrant a penalty. So, such as the rules of the game, I don't know what you thought of that.
No, it was absolute bullshit. But I feel like the Super League, they're not strong enough compared to the NRL to keep going it alone in terms of not responding to increasing sort of litigiousness around concussion and the fact that rugby's lowered their maximum height in terms of, you get sent off very, very easily for the rest of the game in rugby for a hit to the head. And Super League, due to lack of funds, if they're sued, just need to follow everything there are, whereas the NRL obviously are washed with cash. So they can be a little more lenient around that. But in saying that, I'm seeing some ridiculous penalties in the NRL as well. But I think the Super League is a consequence of having to follow rugby union in England and respond to, the whole concussion furor and all that kind of stuff. So I think the maximum height is around shoulder that you can tackle in the Super League. It's almost going to be a trial sort of trial ground for the NRL to look at how does it work in rugby league, because Super League's broke and all it takes is a few players suing them for the game to go under, really.
Yeah, and I think that was something that tackle safety is very important. Let's not take, especially I think in the lower grades, once it permeates down to the junior grades, and you can't. You need young boys to be playing this, and obviously they need to be playing with their heads. But Matty Smith getting sent off with an elbow, dumb play, but yeah, it was in the game, probably frustrated. The Warrington Wolves 36 over London Broncos 22. Well done, London, for scoring a few points. That's how far we've gone in terms of giving them praise. And then last but not least, Lee over Hull FC 42-12. So fair few big scorelines in Super League as well. that was probably the disappointing thing takeaway from this weekend. There was like, I mean, I was hoping we'd come on here and talk about the Dragons Dogs game. I'm going to talk about it for all the wrong reasons, to be honest. But we was hoping for a few tight ones, and we didn't necessarily get them. I mean, there's a few tight scores, but not necessarily tight games. But yeah, and the ladder for Super League, Hull KR still on top over Wigan. Warrington coming in third, and then you've got the three teams with 26 points: the Saints, Dragons, and Salford. So top six pretty solidified.
I've got a few bit of a ranting style comments to make about Super League. Castleford Tigers. What fucking tiger is green? What is with that jersey that they wear when they're not at home? And it's just, get rid of it. It's fluoro green. They're not the Canberra Raiders. It's got nothing to do with the tiger. I don't know where it came from, and it's a fucking hideous jersey. Get rid of it. Even more brutal. What did Huddersfield contribute anyway? Like, they've got a great stadium, sure, but they share it with a soccer team. I don't think they don't fully own it or anything like that. They're lucky to get ninth in those IMG rankings, because I'll tell you what, of all of the teams in the Super League, they're probably the team where I'm just like, they do fuck all the time. They hang around sort of the bottom half of the ladder most of the time. They spend well below the salary cap. And they just sort of, you could probably, have Leeds absorb that catchment anyway. I just don't know what Huddersfield contribute whatsoever. And this whole bullshit that you got the Northern English clubs complaining that clubs like Catalan don't contribute away fans to their gate takings. What century are we living in where you're relying on the gate takings from traveling away fans to keep you afloat? If you need that, then you shouldn't be in the top flight as it is. Now, what I will agree with from the Northern English club's point of view is the French TV deal does need to sort of be generated and start coming in. Hopefully IMG can do something about that. But yeah, brutal, I know, but I don't even know what Huddersfield are doing in there. That crowd of 3,300, pathetic in my mind. And I think I probably should leave it at that, really. Actually, I've got one more complaint. Next week this weekend, I should say, is Magic Weekend in the Super League. They obviously created the concept of Magic Weekend in a very unpopular decision. This one's actually only at Ellen Road, which is not really the whole idea that a Magic Weekend was created, was that it was like at Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. It's been held in Newcastle and Liverpool, all these cities, that it was used as a genuine expansion tool for the game to go to different places in the UK and have enough fans traveling from every single club to create a carnival style atmosphere. This one's like walking down the road to Ellen Road. So it's, I mean, the fact that it's at only Ellen Road aside, I think we're going to have probably a sellout in day one, because Wigan are playing St Helens and Warrington are playing Leeds, two massive games. But then we'll be lucky to get half the crowd on the Sunday. Surely one of those two big drawing games could have been moved to the Sunday and have one on the Saturday. It's just poor planning in my mind. But anyway, on a more positive note, super well done to Hull KR, absolutely killing it. They got some private equity funding, or I think it was about 18 months ago, or just in time for the IMG ratings to be reviewed. So it goes to show what a club can do when they get their finances right and they get enough money that it's more than just hand to mouth, and they can go out and invest in the back office and the front office too. So well done to Hull KR. But let's move on to our first topic of the night. The sort of the biting, would you call it an accusation, or is it just acknowledged that Kyle Flanagan did bite Stephen Crichton on the weekend? I think we can acknowledge that he did, right?
Yeah, I was saying Flano, Kyle didn't. One of the funniest things I read on social media was apparently what they should do is they should just look for Stephen's dad, Critter's dad, and just have it out in the car park under 12 style. It was a bite, in my opinion, and very. I'll play devil's advocate. Not that I really want to, but Critter's nose was there. Like, he's obviously a very aggressive player. Is there any leeway for Flano to be like, there's a nose in my face. Let me bite down on this. Or I mean, to be honest, I don't even agree with that. But is there any defense for him?
Yeah, I think there is. Look, he needs to cop a few weeks. But in saying that, Stephen Crichton is not faultless in this. Like if you probably this is probably a terrible analogy, but if you go stick your hand in a plane propeller, like part of it's your fault sticking your hand in the plane propeller. He like three-quarters of the way through that tackle, Stephen Crichton's face was nowhere near um Kyle Flanagan. Apologies for Shane Flanagan for Kyle Flanagan's head. And then he just carried on with it and basically stuck his nose in his mouth. Like if you're gonna stick your nose in someone's mouth, then yeah, maybe it might get bitten. Maybe. Like I don't know. Like I'm kind of siding with Kyle Flanagan on this, if I'm being honest.
Well, I think you could have it. It's a very unpopular opinion. I mean, I have read that viewpoint, and I sort of can see it, but like, I'll bridge it to the next sort of phase of this discussion, which is where does it rank in the grub scale? Now, it's obviously nowhere near the Hopper finger because that was unprovoked. And when I was researching this, apparently Will Hopperwade said that that was actually meant to be a joke for the boys in video. So that was premeditated and a joke. So definitely not that grubby. Now you've got the Hudson Young eye gouges. I think he's done it multiple times in the last few years. That's also premeditated. I mean, not premeditated, but totally unprovoked. Greg Bird needed a head. That was ridiculous, and he copped a massive fine for that. The only other biting incident recently was Jack Whiten, and he argued that Tyson Gamble put his wrist in his mouth, and I think he got away with it. I don't think Whiten got one match for playing something small enough that didn't really make big of an impact. Do you remember that?
I think he got 3 weeks. I think.
Okay, so 3 weeks, and I think that's probably where Kyle sits in terms of maybe even less because the wrist doesn't really affect you. The nose is just another level of like because Critter's got a bit of a schnoz on him, not so much now, but that sort of he had to yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think Flano biting, it's not as bad as the others, but it's still a grub act, and you have to set a precedent. He has to sit down for a few weeks. Now, where would you put him? Was the James Graham biting incident that was pretty messed up? Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think he'll be remembered for this. I think it'll be very few people will remember this. I don't rate it highly at all. I think it's nowhere near any of the. I mean, I would argue that. I mean, at least on par as Joe Offengawe, his squirrel grip on Dalamatani Zelezniak just 2 weeks ago. Imagine having your sack grabbed in the heat of the moment, when you're just trying to play the ball. I don't know. I maybe I'm being too lenient on this, but I just don't stick your nose in someone else's mouth if you don't want to get bitten. I mean,
I think
is it more complicated than that?
I think squirrel grips. That is unfortunately part of the game. I remember, especially in the lower grades. I remember seeing this guy. He's a bus driver, and he was just telling me, yeah, because he was a small fella. Yeah, that was one of his ways to tackle, which is squirrel grip. It's sort of
just grab him by the balls.
Yeah, so it's part of the biting. Unfortunately, biting fortunately is not part of the game, and yeah, it won't be remembered for it. But it is. I think what really was the difference between actually Whiten's one and this one was when they panned to Critter and his nose is bloody. That is sort of like, whoa, what's happened here? But yeah, poor both of them. Both of them probably deserve some of the blame, but I'm gonna say 80 on Flano, 20 on Critter. But if Critter didn't put his nose there, would Flano have bit? Probably not. But I just love the way Shane Flanagan defended his son, like completely blameless, according to Shane Flanagan. and he believes his son. He believes his son that he didn't bite down. So yeah,
Of course
it,
he,
it,
of
it
course he
it's
does.
sort of yeah, but it's sort of you just have to look at it and go, mate, he fucked up and cop it. And the Dragons, they've had a decent year, but what an awful way to probably end it.
Yeah, I kind of hope the Dragons make the eight. Just see the Bulldogs and the Dragons in the eight. It'll be a fascinating final series as well. They both draw big crowds, those clubs, as well. But anyway, let's move on to our second topic, which is the notorious subject of international or state of origin player eligibility. And the reason why we bring this up is there's an article in News Limited, Daily Telegraph, Courier Mail, etc., which is a bit of a feature article interview with Isaiah Katoa of the Dolphins fame there. Now, I'm just going to read through the section that's most pertinent to the topic that we're going to talk about. So it's under Jersey Wars, and it's Katoa, 20, is one of the NRL's rising stars with the representative world at his feet. He is eligible to play Test football for Australia, New Zealand, and Tonga, who he has already featured in for 6 games, debuting in 2022 before he had even played in the NRL. Having grown up in Western Sydney, Katoa is also eligible to play State of Origin for New South Wales and should be regarded as Cleary's long-term successor in the Blues number 7 jersey. But how long he wants to wait for that honour remains to be seen, especially with Parramatta's Mitchell Moses waiting in the wings. Katoa is odds on to be selected by Tonga at the end of the year Pacific Championships, but can afford to keep his options open. And it wouldn't surprise if new Kiwis coach Stacey Jones inquired about his services. Former Kiwis coach Michael Maguire, the current New South Wales Origin coach, sounded him out in high school about playing for New Zealand, but that will rule Katoa out of representing the Blues, and he insists that he is happy to play for Tonga. He said, I spoke to Michael Maguire when I was 17 or 18. He talked to me about how my footy was going and wished me luck. He told me there was an opportunity for me to go to the Kiwis, and if I wanted to play for them, he'd be happy to consider me for selection. At the same time, I had aspirations to represent Tonga. There's still some unfinished business there with Tonga, and I haven't really had the success that we want. I've definitely thought about Origin. That's the decision that I've got to make. Do I go down the path of playing for the Kiwis or New South Wales? All I can control is playing footy and making sure that I'm working hard on my game. The place to do that is with the Dolphins and later this year for Tonga. Now, just before I get your thoughts on this, Lou, for those that don't know, you are only allowed to play for New South Wales or Queensland if you have resided in that state before the age of 13. However, you can't play for New South Wales or Queensland, or so you can't play Origin if you have also played for New Zealand or England, because their class is Category 1 or Tier 1 nations, whilst Tonga, Samoa, and every other country for that matter is classed as Tier 2. So you can play for those countries and still be eligible to play State of Origin. Now, why would Isaiah Katoa play for New Zealand in this situation, even if he was super passionate about being a Kiwi, which he was born in New Zealand and he lived there for the first 9 years of his life? What are your thoughts on the current structure in terms of the eligibility here, Lou?
Yeah, because Katoa, when did he move over to Australia again?
9 years old.
He moved over when he was 9 years old, and he played rugby union at school. Went to Buck College on scholarship, and he's obviously going to be swayed by the pay packet of State of Origin. That is, let's be honest, that is what's really happening. He's not being swayed by the passion of playing for New South Wales, because last tidbit I'd say is Devi Stewart, future Raiders and New South Wales State of Origin fullback, he said he absolutely hates Queensland because when he was growing up, his dad used to scream at the TV, and it made him so angry that Queensland would win that Chevy grew up hating Queensland. That's the sort of guy you want playing Origin. You don't want guys who, you know, went for Queensland because they absolutely love watching the dominant teams of, Slater, Thurston, Cronk, Inglis, Falau, all those guys, right? That's sort of where probably Katoa fits in terms of, I watched Origin because it was good. As opposed to, I grew up in New South Wales, I hate Queensland, I want to put on sky blue. And that's what Origin was built on. Now, I think the problem is there's a lot of boys who do come over from New Zealand and sort of still make this criteria. I think when we talked about it a couple of days ago, Sonny Bill Williams is one of those guys. I'm pretty sure Kieran Foran's another one. And my suggestion is the 13 years old, maybe even bring it lower. And that way you can really either filter out those boys who come over for whatever reasons, or you either bring it down to a certain age that it's very hard for anyone that wasn't born here born in Australia to play Origin, or open up the floodgates, let the likes of Tamalolo play, let the likes of Sonny Bill Williams play, and allow the boys who play for New Zealand to also play Origin. So I'm in both camps in terms of you either make it so tight that it's hard for boys to play it, or let them all play. Because I think at the moment you don't want to give people the choice. Like Adam Fanua-Blake, that Adam Fanua-Blake, that's another one. It's very strange that he's locked into the Kiwis even though he's not born and raised there. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are I'm pretty adamant that the same rule that currently applies for Tier 2 nations, that being you can still play international for them and play state of origin if you've resided in New South Wales or Queensland prior to the age of 13, should apply to England and New Zealand as well. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean players like Sean Johnson or Roger Tuivasa-Sheck can all of a sudden turn out for New South Wales or Queensland, because they haven't resided in New South Wales or Queensland before the age of 13. So, sure, yes, you'd pick up your players like Tamalolo and back in the day, Sonny Bill Williams, but you're not going to pick up people that have lived in New Zealand their whole life and play for the Warriors, for example. I think it should be, it's really disadvantaging New Zealand right now, because they are like, let's say Katoa was super passionate about being a Kiwi. What you're inadvertently doing here is potentially asking him to give up 90 grand per year in state of origin, plus all of if you play state of origin, it's heavily correlated to a higher club contract in terms of the amount as well. So it's not like you're just foregoing the 90 grand. If you've got a state of origin player at your club, that you're going to pay them more, because they're just obviously superstars of the game. So yeah, I think one rule for all of the nations, and just to be clear, you're not going to get genuine sort of lived in New Zealand the whole life, but you're going to allow people like Victor Radley to be able to play for England as well as New South Wales, because right now it's ridiculous. But if you tighten it too much, this is the thing that I said to you the other day. If expansion is truly successful in terms of the Western Bears and Melbourne start to get off their ass and develop genuine Victorians that turn out for them, like Suat Fire-Longa, they're also ineligible for New South Wales and Queensland. So there's a dichotomy here in the fact that the more successful the NRL becomes in terms of expansion into new markets, the less their flagship product state of origin becomes the best of the best. Because you can have eventually, there's no reason why you can't have some superstar players that have been developed by Perth. And then just obviously you wouldn't want a West Australian turning out for New South Wales or Queensland because they haven't resided there before the age of 13. Have you got any thoughts on this conundrum? It's a weird one to think about, isn't it? Because we don't really develop players outside of New South Wales or Queensland.
Yeah, I think when we looked it up around Perth-based juniors, there was Curtis Rona was probably the shining light there. And I think the issue is, I think we're thinking too far into the future if we're sort of ruling out. So if we're incorporating those guys, I know that you have to think quite far into the future with this sort of planning, but I think with something like the NRL, rugby league, the hot sport at the moment, you just have to sort of push through what's working and then worry about, if Melbourne was able to develop, or Victoria was able to develop gun players and all that sort of stuff later down the track. I just wanted to check as well, because Ben Theo actually was a surprising one. He grew up in New Zealand, moved to Australia at the age of 17, if his Wikipedia is to be believed. He still played for Queensland. So I think the rules have got a lot tighter recently after the Mulatalo, I think, was the one who sort of made it all a bit more clear in terms of who was allowed to play for New South Wales and Queensland, who isn't. But I think when you talk about the tier one, so it's just it would completely take away from the international game if guys turned out for New South Wales and Queensland, um, and then turned out for England and New Zealand. I think Jen and Kemp said it sort of turned into like an all-star game. And if you've followed any NBA or anything like that, the all-star games, whilst it's the best players, it doesn't necessarily develop the best game because they're less enthusiastic about it. It's almost like, yeah, because we've seen it actually. There is an all-star game at the start of the season, and it's not as like it doesn't draw eyeballs to it because it's not that it hasn't got the same sort of feel. And I'd hate for the State of Origin, which is still the premier product, I'd hate for it to lose its feel, but it's
Yeah,
a
I
very
see.
difficult one to answer.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with the All Stars game up until they. Do you remember when it, like right now it's New Zealand Maori versus Australian Indigenous, and when it was Australian Indigenous versus the rest of the world or you know anyone else basically, how do you get behind a team that's just like, oh, what's this team? It's like, oh, they're just the NRL All Stars. Like they're just like they're the non-Indigenous players. Like it's just you almost felt a little bit racist when you went for them. Like it was a weird concept. But then when you throw the Maori in there and you've got the Australian Indigenous, it's a genuine competition where you've got two passionate cultures. And it was actually the perfect recipe for it, I think. If it was expanded to a third team, Pacific Islanders, Polynesian group, that'd be an interesting one. But I wouldn't want to see that happen because I think it'll take it away from, the international, Tonga, Samoa, etc. Adding to the competitive playing nations that make up the international rugby league these days. Whereas like the New Zealand Maori and Australian Indigenous, they don't have their own. They represent Australia and New Zealand at the international realm. But anyway, just before we go, let's get a quick fire tips for the NRL. So perhaps a precursor to the grand final on Thursday night in Penrith, we have the Panthers taking on the Storm. Who have you got for that one?
No, Panthers, I think they're still too good, aren't they?
I'm going to go to Storm. I mean, Panthers were almost beaten by Newcastle 2 weeks ago. Very, very lucky to escape against the Eels last week. I know the Storm hadn't. I think they lost to the Dragons, but yeah, I'm going to go to Storm for that one. All right, Manly versus the Warriors in Manly, Friday 6 p.m.
Manly. Unfortunately, the Warriors. I can't remember last time they travelled on a Friday night and won. I genuinely can't recall. Do you know?
Yeah, Manly should. Like, I worry about the scoreline, to be honest. I pretty much think Manly by 30 plus. Like, I hope I'm wrong, but like, yeah, what I saw against the Raiders, and Raiders right now are a better team than the Warriors, and they put 46 on the Raiders, and now they're back at Brookvale. I don't know. I worry about that for the Warriors. Easy Manly win for me. Roosters versus Eels, Friday 8 p.m.
Well, that could be a tight game. I think the Roosters will get over the Eels. Yeah, the Eels. They must be hurting after that loss to Penrith.
How weird is Clint Gutherson's? Is it like a left to right kick for a right footer for his goal kicking? It's strange to see. Usually you have this sort of right to left curve, but he seems to have the opposite, which is really strange. Bulldogs versus Dolphins, Saturday 3 p.m.
I think the Dogs continue their march towards the finals. They've got all the momentum.
Yeah. I'm going to go Dogs as well. Dolphins, oh, geez, the fall, it may not look as bad after the win against the Warriors, but the fact that it got that close, yeah, no confidence whatsoever behind the Dolphins for me. So I'll go the Bulldogs. North Queensland versus Canberra up in Townsville.
Well, you know what? Let's get Raiders. Let's get back the season back on track somehow.
Yeah, this is like the Neil Henry Cup, isn't it? Did Neil Henry coach both these clubs?
Yeah, he dogged the Raiders went to the Cowboys, and he felt like the Raiders didn't have the team for him to win a comp, and didn't win one at the Cowboys either. So.
Yeah, seriously. West Tigers versus Rabbitohs. Oh, good Sydney derby, that one. Who have you got for that?
Oh yeah,
It's a Campbelltown.
I don't know. You know what? Let's see the Tigers win a game. Let's let's just hope they win one for once. Oh, last time
Yeah.
they won with the Raiders, but yeah.
And the Rabbitohs will be rocked by the Latrell white powder scandal that seems to be breaking as we speak. Dragons versus Titans, Sunday, 2 p.m.
God. Yeah, Dragons. I mean Titans. They let us down. Every time we think that they're gonna come back, they did a great job against who they beat the 2 weeks ago, and then now they who they beat? They beat
Broncos.
Broncos, yeah, they smashed the Broncos, and then they turned up and got smashed at home. Yeah, the Dragons should win that.
Yeah, I love watching Sunday afternoon footy on a Sunday on a sunny day in Wollongong. The view of the beach in the background behind the hill there, world class. Last game of this round, because the Broncos have the Marcus bye. Sharks versus Knights in Woolooware.
Yeah,
you got to go to the Sharks, I think. But yeah, Newcastle don't look too bad. So yeah, I mean, you got to go to the Sharks. Next up, and for the last segment of this episode, we're going to try the elimination tournament that we first tried the other week. That week, if you guys remember, was which club is the hardest to follow. And we obviously deduced that the Warriors were, albeit a bit biasly, followed by the Tigers through a process of elimination. I'll leave Lewis to introduce the concept of this next elimination tournament.
So the concept is, I've gone back since the year 2000 and cherry-picked teams that I deem were the best losers. Now, and I haven't selected a team twice. So say, for example, the Manly Seagulls have lost multiple times since the year 2000. I've picked their best team in 2007. They probably should have won the grand final for not salary cap reasons. But so I've picked 8 teams, and what Keith is going to decide is the greatest NRL team to not win a grand final since the year 2000. That's essentially what he's awarding here. So first game up, Rabbitohs 2021 versus Parramatta Eels 2001. So if you remember, Parramatta Eels, greatest point scoring team of all time, etc., got ambushed by Andrew Johns versus the Rabbitohs 2021. Probably could have beat the Penrith Panthers, but Keith, who do you think should have won? Who would win this game if they played tomorrow?
That one for me is easy. The dominance of Parramatta throughout that 2001 season. It's the season-long equivalent of somehow losing the unlosable game. The hands down, I think that was the era with sort of Nathan Hindmarsh, Luke Burt, Nathan Kalis, all those guys in it. Maybe Eric Groth, or was that a bit later on? But yeah, easily Parramatta for me.
Yeah, they had all, Jason Taylor's record-breaking season as well, I think. So next one up would be Penrith Panthers. Before their dynasty, they lost to the Melbourne Storm. Up against the New Zealand Warriors 2011. So you've got the Penrith Panthers of 2020 versus the New Zealand Warriors of 2011. Sean Johnson shout out, lightning and bottle, 16 games into his NRL career. Who would you pick?
Yeah, you go Penrith Panthers of 2020. Although the thing with the New Zealand side is you didn't know how good that team was in the moment. And then obviously James Maloney went on to have a storied career, and whatever club that he joined, he took them to the grand final at least. Sean Johnson obviously went on to play, a long, reasonably successful career as well. So, but you can't go past the Panthers 2020 side for me.
They probably could have won the game as well if they had a bit more time. Looking back, I remember there was interviews saying that they were a bit too nervous, etc. So now we've got the Manly 2017. If you remember, Brett Stewart got taken out, and they also got beaten by a salary cap supercharged Melbourne Storm versus what I believe is the most talented team to lose, but not necessarily the best team, the Brisbane Broncos 2023 side. Who have you got?
I think in terms of the strength of the team, I'm actually going to go Manly. Yeah, it's what you touched on. Individual brilliance, you'd have to go the Broncos side, of course. But yeah, as a team, cohesive unit, I'm going to go Manly, 2007.
Yeah. And I think they proved it the following year, didn't they? Whereas and the Broncos have proven that their individuals going down this year, they're not as strong. So, and the last game of the bracket you've got of the quarters, you've got the Roosters 2004, who, if you recall, Keith was a fan of, but also they lost to the Bulldogs, who were red hot after their salary cap scandals, Cops Harbour scandals, all that sort of stuff. So they lost to them versus the Raiders 2019, six again. BJ Leilua forward past the Rapana in the corner. They weren't the best team. They're not the most talented team. They're not the most pretty team, but they were probably the most battle hardened team that could have and should have won a grand final. They were probably the closest out of all these losers to actually get over the line, except for Broncos actually. But I'm presuming, actually, I won't put words in your mouth. Who have you got?
Surely even you must acknowledge the Roosters 2004. Like Anthony Minicello, Brad Fittler, Brett Finch, Craig Wing, Adrian Morley, Craig Fitzgibbon, all these players. Yeah, hands down the Sydney Roosters for that one.
Yeah, I mean they did lose a lot. You could have picked any Roosters side, to be honest. And I picked the 2004 side because I think that was the end of their run. But yeah, even the team before it, 2003. Who was it again? Guinea Burn running down the sideline, getting taken out by
Scott
yeah.
Sattler.
So you got okay. So just to recap, we've got the semi-finals now. We've got Parramatta 2001 versus Penrith 2020.
Yeah, it's a hard one because we know what the 2020 side went on to do, but they weren't quite as like Nathan Cleary was still developing as a player then. The dominance of the Parramatta, it's a real tough one. Yeah, all right, I'll go Penrith as well. I mean, hindsight, there's a hindsight bias in it as well. I'll go Penrith.
Penrith 2020. That's fair enough. And Manly 2007 versus Roosters 2004.
Roosters 2004. Oh.
Roosters 2004.
Yeah. I think because Brad Fittler is in there, for me, if Brad Fittler wasn't in there, it'd be sort of almost like a tiebreaker. I think he breaks the tie for me. For me, I think that he should almost be in the conversation for a future immortal, but that's just me. Sure. So I'm gonna go.
Of course, and I think and he's also got a up and coming son that's also looks like an absolute beast. Okay, so for the grand final, we'll call it the Brad Fittler Cup. Penrith 2020 versus the Roosters 2004 side. Who have you got?
All right, let's take a look at some of the names. Actually, no, let's scrap that. We're running out of time here. I am going to go with, I'm going to go with, in the moment, the Roosters 2004, because the players in that side were more established at that specific time. Whereas the 2020 Panthers side probably lost just due to lack of experience and because they were too green. But I guess the caveat that I'm trying to make here is that the Panthers side of 2020, almost all of those players went on to have absolutely superstar careers in the years preceding it. I know we're only in 2024, and we know the fact that they've won the last 3 grand finals shows just that was the bones or foundations of the run. But in that specific moment, frozen in time, I think the Roosters 2014 was better.
I think I agree. I think if I'm going to be totally honest, man, Manly 2007, I think we missed the best part of them because I mean they flogged the Storm. They lost to the Roosters a few years later. They beat the Warriors. Des Hasler showed just how good of a coach he is. And if it wasn't for some salary cap loaded teams, that we'd be looking at them in a similar vein as the Penrith Panthers, in my opinion, because they had a very similar sort of hardened culture where local boys and guys who loved the club were winning games. Anyways, so according to Keith, the greatest losing NRL side in the last 24 years. Congratulations to Sydney Roosters, 2004. So we haven't got you anything, but yeah, congrats, boys.
And you can take that to the bank, anyone listening. I'll defend that to my core. All right, well, that seems like another good place to leave it for this week. As always, we'll see you next week, and we'll try and get some more interview shows out there. Like and subscribe. We're still trying to grow the podcast, of course, share, etc., etc. But thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Everything Rugby League. If you like this episode, give the show a follow and leave a review. For more news and insights, follow us on Facebook or head to everythingrugbyleague.com.